The Crow and such. All right, everyone, welcome to Ruben Uncut. Today, in anticipation of the new Crow movie, I watched all the Crow movies. All of them. Not the fan films, only the theatrically released ones. Now, I also did not watch the TV show Stairway to Heaven. Didn't watch that. But I did watch all the Crow movies. So today, including the new one, including 2024's The Crow, I will be ranking all of the Crow movies, just going through them. Now, before we begin, I just want to address something about these movies, and I'll bring this back up again. In many ways, you may have noticed there was a lot of negative reaction to the mere concept of the 2024 Crow being a, air quotes, reboot. The reason for this is simple. Is because the original Crow is a strange film because it captures something rare. The original Crow movie is the superhero equivalent to a movie by James Dean. Now, I'm not talking about the porn star here. James Dean, of course, was the famous actor from A Rebel Without a Cause. He did a total of 3 movies, and then he died, leaving his immense untapped potential as untapped potential. And the reality is that the first Crow movie also represents this. It represents a moment in time captured on film where Brandon Lee's potential, the son of Bruce Lee, was recognized, where it was shown through the cinematic trappings of the movie. And this is important because none of Brandon Lee's other movies are good. They are B-movie schlock that he probably was only offered because of his name. The Crow represents honest look at his potential. The actor that could have been. The movies that he could technically probably have gotten made. Would Brandon Lee have been in The Matrix if he had lived? Quite possibly. Would he have been the main character? Hard to say. The point is that Brandon Lee would have gotten the types of roles that Bruce Lee always said kung fu actors should be able to get. But now he never will. And this is why, in many view, the original movie as sort of a sacred cow of Hollywood. Because it represents this man's potential that was cut short. Which makes every sequel something that's kind of fighting against this. Now, in fairness to the universe of The Crow, it actually makes sense to replace the actor every movie, actually. Crows in the comic books and novels and other extended universe of The Crow, I believe are rarely, if ever, the same Crow. Now, to be fair, I haven't read all the comics. Quick edit here. I looked it up, and Eric Draven actually is the only Crow to appear more than once in a comic book. He appeared in a crossover with a Image character called Razor, and then also had a 10-issue Image Comics miniseries. That being said, there have actually still been a wide number of different Crows in the various comic book series. Only the original, and one of the ones that starred a female Crow a long time ago, barely remember it. But the point is that the Crow universe does allow for other Crows. Something that we will be getting into. But let's get into the thick of it, okay? We're not going to waste any time. We're just going to start ranking shit, okay? So we're going to start off with number 5. The 5th best, or, as you can look at it, the absolute worst Crow movie is...
that when someone dies, The crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. Then sometimes, the crow can bring that soul back to put the wrong things right.
Didn't we kill that guy?
That's right. The worst Crow movies, easily. Like, this is not even close, people. It's easily Wicked Prayer. Wicked Prayer is where the series sort of jumps the shark in a way. To be fair, arguably, most of the Crow movies are not good. But Wicked Prayer is the one where the badness reaches a level where it is undeniably whack. Slash wacky. You may have noticed David Boreanaz and, yes, Dennis Hopper are in this movie. And the thing about that is that they are apparently in some sort of scene-chewing competition where they essentially get on set and they just start chewing the scenery so hard that it's making your mom's labia uncomfortable. That's what I'm saying. It's fucking wild. This is the cheesiest of all of these movies. Like, easily the cheesiest. And it's just several problems with the movie that make it hard to take seriously. So we'll start with my first reaction to the film as I was watching it, which was that the font showed up. My immediate thought to the text font of this film was, oh, well, that's a fucking choice. As I'll get into, certain Crow movies, they sort of either overdid the stylization or underdid the stylization. With the third Crow movie, they underdid the stylization. So for the fourth movie, they were like, you know what? This movie needs style. Yeah. Whose style should we use? What if we made it like a Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez double pick? You know, like From Dusk Till Dawn, except trash. And that's what they went with. Now, the other major problem with the film, now, like one of the things that's holding it back, and I hate to say this because I feel mean. Poor Edward Furlong is someone who's been really pushed around by life and has only 2 major acting credits to his career that are of any real significance, and they're being the kid from Terminator 2 and the kid from American History X. Now, to be fair, if you're going to have your only 2 good movies be Terminator 2 and American History X, that's not bad. Those are some great films that really added to cinema. The Crow Wicked Prayer is a movie where Edward Furlong is woefully miscast. Woefully miscast. Now, I say that because part of the weird thing about Edward Furlong is that Edward Furlong has never stopped looking like a teenage boy, even though he's a full-grown adult man in this movie. There's a number of times Edward Furlong sort of morphs throughout the film as you're going around, just based on different lighting, camera angles, and how he's dressed. Now, it's worth noting The Wicked Prayer is one of the movies where we spend a decent amount of time with him before he becomes the Crow. Now, I don't want to get distracted by that right now. Let's get back to Edward Furlong and my major problems with Edward Furlong. Edward Furlong in this movie doesn't do he is woefully miscast. Woefully miscast, and I can say with no doubt at all that he is woefully miscast for a couple of reasons. The one reason is, before he becomes the Crow, he looks like a child in an adult suit. Like, literally a small man wearing an adult suit that is too big for him. Suit jackets and shit, no, it does not look good. Then he becomes the Crow, at which point he alternates between looking like he's on his way to some type of convention in a The Cure cosplay. And I want to be clear, that's the best case scenario of how he looks in the film. For other significant shots of the film, Edward Furlong looks kind of like my ex-fiance, who I hope is doing well. I wish her the best of luck. That being said, Am I saying that I would let Edward Furlong blow me in a dress? Only if he's wearing the crow makeup. That has to be explicitly stated. Only if he's wearing the crow makeup. Where was I? Right, making fun of this movie. The movie also stars Tara Reid, who's just kind of there, to be completely honest. This film also tries to bring in some sort of fetishization, I guess, of Native Americans, even though the head Native American is played by Danny Trejo. I mean, Aztecs are technically Native American tribes. And that is actually the angle the movie goes with, calling them Aztecs. Yes, this film has a surprisingly stacked cast for a movie this incredibly bad. I mean, Dennis Hopper seems like he's having fun. Did I mention Dennis Hopper plays a pimp? Because Dennis Hopper plays a pimp. This film seems to almost notice that Edward Furlong is not its strength because the movie really wants to spend a lot of its focus on David Boreanaz and Tara Reid. I'm sorry, Tara Reid. But David Boreanaz also seems to be having the time of his life, stealing every scene he's in by, like I said, chewing as much scenery as possible. In fact, one is surprised he has not gained weight from the amount of scenery he has chewed by the end of the film. Well, maybe he's chewing and spitting instead of chewing and swallowing. Hard to say. But The Crow Wicked Prayer is terrible. I could spend a ton of time just lamenting its various numerous oddball foibles. But the reality is that those problems are insurmountable to the fact that Edward Furlong is the Crow, and there's no good action scenes. I think he kills a guy with a baseball bat at one point. Like, literally, there's a flashback to him killing each of the people from the satanic cult. By the way, David Boreanaz runs the satanic cult in the movie. That's his deal. But there's like a montage reminding you of his kills of the various members of the group. And like right before that montage played, my actual thought was, did he even kill anybody? And then the montage plays, and I was like, oh no, he did. Those moments were just unbearably unmemorable. The Crow Wicked Prayer, I have no difficulty at all saying, is the very worst of the Crow movies. Like, ouch. Let's move on to number 4, the second worst Crow movie, or fourth best, depending on your perspective.
It's believed that when someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. But sometimes the crow can bring that soul back to put the wrong things right. I thought that Eric was the last. I never imagined there would be another.
It's another time. It's another world. And another has been chosen. The Crow, City of Angels.
That's right. The fourth best or second worst Crow movie is City of Angels, which is actually kind of a shame because City of Angels almost works as far as sort of pale imitations of a previous film that count as a sequel, and the only movie that actually makes direct reference to the original film that it's a sequel to. The Crow City of Angels almost works, except it has two things. It has two things actively fighting against it at any given moment. First of all, I need to talk about the writing of The Crow, because the writing of this Crow City of Angels, and let's be fair, a lot can change between this what the screenwriter puts on paper and when the film hits the movie, so to speak.
Real quick editor's note. I talk about the movie feeling underwritten. Well, it turns out that the film was actually edited by Harvey Weinstein afterwards, and unfortunately, Harvey Weinstein frequently treated his movies the way he treated his women, which was as disposable things for him to use for income and his own gratification. And he was also kind of a petty bitch about everything. So the reason it feels underwritten is because they edited a lot of the story and character development out of the film. So it's not really David S. Goyer's fault. Just throwing that in here.
This movie was written by David Goyer. In fact, this is the first comic book movie written by David S. Goyer. Now, that is significant because Goyer is, in fact, one of the most influential movie writers of comic book movies possibly ever. Having written both some of the greatest and worst comic book movies of all time in a range from Ghost Rider: The Spirit of Vengeance and the Nick Fury made-for-TV movie, all the way up through the Blade movies, the Man of Steel, and of course, the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. Also, got one of the guys working on the Sandman TV show. David S. Goyer is a force of power, typically for good in the comic book industry, but occasionally saddled with being connected to movies like this, Crow, the City of Angels, which in fairness is actually not his worst comic book movie. However, one of the two things that is easily holding back this Crow movie is the general lack of characterization for its characters. Ash, as he's called in here, played by Vincent Perez, just, as far as Crows go, just does not, he's just a little underdeveloped. This movie goes in the direction of trying to make it a little bit more like the comic book by making the deaths more random. Most Crow movies have made this choice to try and make the deaths of the Crow and his loved one less random, to add these elements of plot, say, for example, the original movie involving real estate, yes, real estate, or the new movie involving a satanic plot. There is something about the adaptations where they just don't want the death and violence to be random. But Crow, City of Angels goes the other way with this, making the deaths more random. Basically, the man's child stumbles upon a murder in progress, and they are killed as witnesses. And of course, he comes back from the dead to, murder everyone involved. This movie also involves a satanic cult. In fact, like 3 out of 5 Crow movies feature some type of satanic cult, or at least, 3 of these movies involve satanic cults, interestingly enough. Side note, some of you probably thought the worst movie would be the new movie. You don't even understand how low this bar is. Wicked Prayer is terrible. But let's get back to City of Angels. So what's the other thing holding it back? I already mentioned that the characters aren't developed, at least in the degree that you would want them to be developed. Well, unfortunately, the other thing that's holding back City of Angels is that it's fucking ugly. It is a hideous film. And 2 things contribute to this. 1, Crow, City of Angels, determination to put everything through red, yellow, and green filters. Let's just undermine the fact that the Crow's aesthetic is black and white. Let's make it so that his makeup looks like it's off-white the whole fucking movie, because he's in some type of yellow, green, or red filter. Most of the movies like that. The other problem with the movie is the close-ups. The whole movie, in my opinion, and this one could be, a little subjective, but I feel like every close-up in this movie is just a little bit too close. You know what I'm saying? It's just a little too close. And the worst of this is that it happens all the time during the action sequence. Even the sequence where he's crowing up, my major thought is these camera angles are just slightly too close. And the whole film's like that, just slightly too close on the close-ups. I wanted it to pull back so much. And the fight scenes, like maybe they didn't hire a guy who had been trained in martial arts since birth by his father this time. So maybe that's why the action scenes use such intense close-ups for the incomprehensible mess that they are portraying on screen. Now, I will say the one thing I did like about this movie is that it's had Iggy Pop in it. don't hate this movie. I think this is a movie that almost works. If it just had a little bit more character development, if it wasn't so hideously shot, if the action scenes were filmed better, and if the ending didn't suck. Oh, right. The ending sucks? I almost forgot. At the end of the movie, so this is how the movie's connected to the original, which makes sense that they would try and do that. This is the second movie in the franchise, the first genuine attempt to make a sequel to it. Connects itself to that movie by starring the adult version of the little girl from the original Crow movie, which is not a bad concept. What is a bad concept is to have her die for the Crow. Whoo, that sucks. That sucks. Why? Why would you do that? Also, the last fight between the bad guy is essentially him kicking the Crow's ass, stealing his power, and then being killed by a horde of crows in some pretty bad CGI. This is 1997. 1997 was a remarkable year for terrible comic book movies. It was also the year of Blade and Spawn. I mean, to be fair, but no, Blade and Spawn are good. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say Blade. What was the other movie that came out that year? Oh, Steel. Now, Spawn's not good either, to be honest. In fact, none of the movies I've just said are as good as Blade. Blade easily bests them all. All those movies I just mentioned, Blade is easily the best. Even though Spawn could be worse. Spawn's definitely better than this. It has better action, at least. And better CGI. All right, you ready? You ready for the next up? You ready for the third best Crow movie? Or third worst Crow movie, depending on, like I said, your perspective? Okay. Let's do it.
I want to be with you forever.
Only forever?
Come on.
The Crow legacy continues when a young man is wrongfully accused of murder.
Alexander Frederick Corvus, do you have any last words?
I love Lauren. I'm innocent.
Now, with the guidance of the Crow, he sets out to find the killer.
Where did you come from?
I'll make sure everyone knows that you're innocent, that you loved her.
What do you want?
I want to know why. I can't be alive, not without you.
Eric Mabius, Kirsten Dunst. The Crow, Salvation.
That's right. The Crow Salvation is the third best Crow movie. That's right. Crow Salvation, the one you probably didn't know about, is the third best Crow movie. And it's, yeah, we're going to talk about it. I enjoyed The Crow Salvation. I know. I said these movies weren't good. And The Crow Salvation is not great. But what I will say about The Crow Salvation is that at the end of the day, The Crow Salvation's worst offense is that its ambitions really strain that budget. Let's talk about that. Okay, so you may notice it stars Kirsten Dunst. It also has Walton Goggins in it as a corrupt cop. So first off, the major thing that goes against The Crow Salvation has to be the fact that they toned down the stylization. In fact, in many ways, The Crow Salvation, in certain ways, feels like a bit of an overcorrection for City of Angels, the movie that it directly followed. And the reason it feels like a little bit of an overcorrection is that it is the flattest in presentation of the Crow movies. Now, arguably, its presentation is still more competent than Wicked Prayer, but it is, in fact, the flattest in terms of presentation, which occasionally gives the film a made-for-TV look. This is one of the things I have to count against The Crow's Salvation, is the cheap feel to it. Now, the other movies feel cheap by today's standards, but that has less to do with the time period they were made. That has more to do with just how they've aged. The Crow's Salvation would be pretty iffy by 2000 standards anyways. There's some wonky green screen walking away from explosion moments. You may have actually caught some of it in the trailer there. But let's get down to it. The Crow's Salvation has an interesting story in the fact that it's more of a murder mystery. The Crow does not know who framed him, and he is on the hunt to find the man with the scarred up arm. Yep, that's right. It's a little bit The Fugitive, if The Fugitive was undead and unkillable. This movie sees the Crow go up against a gang of corrupt, murderous cops, which honestly makes me give the movie huge points. I'm down for that. That's different. Let's see it happen. Cops, corrupt cops, murdering people, that's a real problem. We'd love to see the Crow deal with it. The fact that he's a convicted felon, that'd be fair, wrongfully convicted for a murder he did not commit, adds a nice spice to this. As he proceeds to, go around wasting evil cops. Now, this is the first post-Matrix Crow movie. And you can tell, but of course, you can also tell that the film was made while that movie was in theaters, so not everyone actually knew how to do Matrix stuff, which, yes, does include some cheap looking bullet time. In fairness, it looks more like the bullet time from Blade than the bullet time from The Matrix, but Blade is from 1997, not 1999. This movie's from 2000. Yeah. In all honesty, though, its story is pretty interesting in comparison to, say, something like City of Angels, where I felt like overall the story was pretty paper thin. Here we actually have a plot and some character stuff going on throughout the film, which is cool. The acting in the film is uneven. In fact, there's numerous points in the movie where, like, my basic reaction was that really the best take? That was the best take you had of that. That's weird because these are professional actors who I'm pretty sure I've seen do better in other things. That was the best take you had. Okay. So that's kind of a problem that occurs throughout the film. But it is something that didn't really hugely bother me in the end. In all regards, The Crow Salvation is an improvement over The Crow City of Angels in almost every way. It has more character development, more story to it. The action is discernible. Now, it's not incredible action, but it goes there. It tries. It throws explosions and other fun stuff at us. Honestly, it works. None of the kills are as significantly memorable as, well, no, there is one kill in this movie that's super memorable. And there is some writing things here and there, like, why is now the time you're choosing to use your Crow ability with memories when you could have used it earlier to convince this person? But you're using it now, I guess that's fine. At least you remembered you have that power. The Crow Salvation is honestly, I enjoyed it. Can I only really recommend it to fans of, well, The Crow? I mean, yeah. But honestly, for a Crow movie, it's not bad. Had a good time. It's cheesy. It clearly doesn't have the budget for some of the things it's trying to do. But as far as Crow movies go, you could do a lot worse. You could do a lot worse. Which brings us to number 2. That's right. The second best Crow movie is the new Crow movie. That's right. I showed you the trailers for the others. Might as well show you the trailer for this one.
What's the first thing you liked about me?
I thought that you were quite brilliantly broken.
You feel like my person?
You feel like my person.
What's the worst thing you've ever done?
I saw things. I shouldn't have seen any of it.
Julie! Julie! Please don't do this!
When someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. But sometimes something so bad happens that the soul cannot rest. Until you put the wrong things right. You were given the power of a god. But you're running out of time to save her.
I'm gonna kill them. Every single one of them.
And killed you?
Yeah, you did.
We have a problem. He came for us.
First impulse. Anger.
It's not anger. It's love.
Look at what you've become. You know that love promises only pain. You have no idea what hell awaits you. No, I do.
How many people have you loved?
I'll never be alone.
That's right. The New Crow is the second best Crow movie. And even then, it's kind of debatable if it's not the best Crow movie. No, I still, well, I think you know who I think is the best Crow movie. Just, because you're paying attention to the list, and we're at number 2. The New Crow movie, I went in with possibly the right expectations because I saw all the Crow movies before I saw this. So going into it, my expectations for what would make this a decent Crow movie were pretty fucking low, especially after I watched Wicked Prayer. After I watched Wicked Prayer, I was like, well, it's gonna be better than this. And it is. If anything, I would criticize the New Crow movie for is that it unnecessarily pokes the sacred cow. That's right. It unnecessarily claims to be a reboot. It unnecessarily claims that that is what it is. And I call it unnecessarily because it is not. Like, there's literally no reason for this movie to not be its own story. Sure, they're named Eric and Shelley, but they have no last name. There's no last name in the credits. They never call them by their last names. So they're not great. They're not Draven. It's not Eric Draven. Doesn't have any of the same characters. That just happen to be a couple characters named Eric and Shelley. And I wish the movie had not done this. Now, there is a part of me that thinks, at least just based on past commentary that was made, that the idea here was that I do believe at some point in production that this was intended to be a reboot. And then at a certain point, it just became its completely own story. And at the end of the day, they were like, we could change the names, but we've already committed to this being a reboot, or as it's been referred to, a reimagining of the comic or readaptation of the comic, which is wild because this has nothing to do with the first volume of the comic. Like, this is in no way Eric and Shelley's story from the comic. Like, it's just not. It's also not Eric and Shelley's story from the original movie. This is its own fucking thing. And they probably should have let it just be its own fucking thing. Now, I looked at some of the Rotten Tomato reviews for the new Crow movie. And I have to say, I don't think critics get the Crow. Like, right now, this movie is rocking on Rotten Tomatoes a 20% out of 51 critics. And that's fucking harsh for what is easily the second best Crow movie. I want to read you some of these reviews real quick. Kirsty Puchko comments, ugly, incoherent, and ultimately cynical, The Crow evokes the words of wisdom from another horror movie about resurrected corpses on a rampage. Sometimes dead is better. This is interesting, because this is actually the least cynical Crow movie I've ever seen. Like, I'm not going to give away the ending, but like, having seen all the Crow movies, this is easily the least cynical ending to a Crow movie. It's sad and poetic, if anything. To call it cynical is weird. In fact, I'd say that this review, just based on this tiny thing here, is trash. Frankly, I don't know if the critics get The Crow, or if my expectations were just set incredibly low by watching all of the other sequels. But I had a good time. Surprisingly good time, actually. The film easily has some of the best action in a Crow movie, although it takes quite a bit of time to really get to it. In fact, this is the thing that needs to be stated about this version of The Crow versus other versions of The Crow. The one unfortunate thing that it has in common with Wicked Prayer, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is this is easily the movie where we spend the most time with Eric and Shelley, or any of the Crows for that matter, before they die. In fact, it takes a while for him to become the Crow in this movie. Easily the most time it has ever taken someone to become the Crow in a movie. Now, to be fair, this kind of makes this the more unique of the Crows. Most of the Crow movies give us the Crow pretty fast. In fact, most Crow movies start with the Crow either being about to die or having just died. But this movie here, it takes us on a long journey to discover the love story between Eric and Shelley. I hate calling them that. I think it's unnecessary that they were called that. I think it just confuses fans and makes people on the internet angry. There's no reason to not look at this as its own Crow movie, because that's how the universe of The Crow works. Just saying. Now, Bill Skarsgård honestly does a great job for a white guy whose first language is clearly not English, and whose accent is vaguely all over the place throughout the film. Also, the movie takes place in like London, and it's never really addressed. Like, almost everyone has a British accent. This is a unique, different Crow movie. And it's also one of the Crow movies that finally gets us back to the goth shit. As the Crow movies went on, they slowly turned down the goth shit. I mean, Wicked City, still pretty goth, except Technicolor for some reason. Salvation, still some goth, but also distinctively Columbine vibes at numerous points. And then you have Wicked Prayer, where almost all the goth is gone. Almost all the goth is gone by the time you get to Wicked Prayer. But they brought the goth back hard for this movie, and I'm all about it. I even appreciate his new eye makeup look. All the Crows eventually do it. And this one is... he uses a different thing in every single movie. Like, in Wicked Prayer, it's a fucking Sharpie he makes his eye things with. I wish I were kidding. I forget what he uses in Salvation. Wicked Prayer, it's his child's paint set. Not Wicked Prayer, I'm sorry. City of Angels, child paint set. Here, it's tattoo ink. Yeah. Of course, in the original movie, it was just regular clown makeup. So yeah, do I recommend this Crow movie? Actually, yeah. Yeah, in a year full of soulless reboots, looking at you, Roadhouse and Twisters, The Crow's better than both of those movies. Those movies suck. Go see The Crow. Can't believe they made a fucking movie about tornadoes. Boring. All right, you've done the math. Here we are. The number one Crow movie, undefeated.
Devil's Night is upon us again. Throw a little party, start a bunch of fires, make a little profit.
When someone's dead, they can't come back, can they?
That's what I thought. Are you referring to anyone in particular?
My daddy used to say, every man's got a devil. You can't rest till you find him.
Winked at me before he jumped out a fourth-floor window like he had wings.
Crow is his link between the land of the living and the realm of the dead.
So you killed the crow.
Call, bang, I'm dead.
The devil stood and felt how awful goodness is. He felt how awful goodness.
That's right. Obviously, the original is still the number one Crow movie. Now, that being said, I could understand why some people might actually like the new movie more than this Crow movie. But there is something about this movie. It has a killer supporting cast that get decently developed. His performance is genuinely what it is. It stands the test of time. Brandon Lee's performance really does show that he could have gone on to be incredible. And tragically, he never got that chance. And that will always be part of this movie's legacy. Brandon Lee dying in one of the most horrific on-screen accidents of all time. Now, I've read different accounts of which scene it is specifically that he gets shot in. I'm not sure which one's real. All I know is that he only had 3 days left of shooting. And also, Chad Stahelski played his body double after he died. Chad Stahelski has also been one of the biggest advocates for stunt safety in the industry. And he also made the John Wick movies, so, you know, he kicks ass. What is there to say about the original Crow? Is some of it dated by today's standards? I mean, yeah. I mean, I would be lying to you if I said that we haven't had a number of advancements in filmmaking since this movie came out that make certain elements of it sort of held back. But that being said, what the film did with what it had in the time period that it was still honestly makes this possibly one of the best comic book movies of the 90s. The 90s were very dark for superheroes, by the way. Like, even the PG-13 stuff like Spawn and Batman Returns was pretty fucking edgy. But there was also a lot of R-rated superhero movies like The Crow, Vampirella, and Blade. Technically, I think Tank Girl counts. Was that rated R? I actually don't remember. But the point is that Brandon Lee's The Crow is still a classic, and its pacing is overall the best. We get thrown into it. And yes, I know that people have been saying, oh, the new movie will be more the comics, and it possibly uses more information from the extended Crow universe of the comics and novels. but it's a completely different story from this, which is almost the story from the comics, except, like I said before, there is this, in the comics, the death of Eric and Shelley is very random. They are essentially, they're broken down by the side of the road with a flat tire when a gang of guys essentially find them, kill them, assault Shelley, and that's how it goes. The original comic book was based on essentially James O'Barr lost his fiance, and so made this comic book as an act of grief and grieving, and thereby created one of the greatest goth superheroes of all time, and one of the most famous of all horror heroes. Yes, that's a category of superheroes, horror superheroes, and also one of the most iconic Revenants ever put to film. Revenant being a type of hero who is essentially come back from the dead. I love this movie. It's a great movie. Has it aged perfectly? No. No, action cinema has come a long way since this film. But for everything that matters, it still holds up. Brandon Lee's performance is still there. The acting is still good overall from all points. And it is, in fact, still the closest to the comic books, even if it changes the plot to be more about real estate for some reason. That was the thing. Hollywood's been obsessed with real estate and bad guys for a long time. Not exactly sure why or when that started, but it's clearly been going on a long-ass time. So yes, in my opinion, this is the definitive ranking of the Crow movies. You don't have to agree. In fact, I encourage you to watch all these fucking movies and then come back here and tell me why I'm wrong. You will never have an argument for Wicked Prayer not being the worst Crow movie, by the way, though. It's so bad. So bad. So bad. Anyways, you now know my opinions on all the Crow movies, so thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you saw here, please like and subscribe. Maybe leave some comments. Maybe share even. That is if you're watching this on YouTube. Although, if you're watching it on Spotify or any other podcast platforms, you can also share there or like or whatever that platform does to show favorability in the algorithm. If you want to contact the program, to tell me I'm wrong, you can also email the program at rubenuncut@gmail.com. It can't rain all the time. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful whatever, wherever, whoever, whenever you are.